Hey, everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. A first for me and this podcast. We have an amazing author and researcher on who is launching a new book. And so I'm excited to bring it to you first. Zach Mercurio is a researcher, educator, and author of um, organizational development and leadership. And his new book, The Power of Mattering, is coming out May 13th. And I'm really excited to talk about it. I've read a copy, a pre release copy, and I was immediately taken by it. The concept is incredible. It's easy to understand, super powerful, and I can't wait to hear directly from him how we got here and some of the ideas behind it. Zach, thanks for coming on. Great Mondays Radio.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for reading the book too. I'm incorporating some of it already. I'm excited to
Already,
talk
yeah,
with you.
exactly. Before we started, I told Zach, I was like, I already incorporated some of these ideas into a talk that I just gave because it was so immediately applicable. It was just incredible. So, all right, so the power of mattering, Zach. Let's start by defining what that is and how we kind of arrived here.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I was a PhD student in organizational development. I was struggling with a research interest. I was on my way to a professional development conference, and I had gotten to know a lot of the cleaners, janitors in the academic building that I was in.
Because you were doing work so late.
Yeah, I was doing work so late. I was always around. Like they were like my best friends, right? That I didn't know that I needed. And so I saw one of them and I was going to this free training and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to this free professional development conference on campus." Um, and she said, "How did you hear about that?" I said, "Well, I got an email." And she just looked deflated. And she said, "I've been here for almost 14 years and no one's ever shown me how to get my email up and running." And I decided from that point, I was like, I want to see what makes workers in these frontline positions tick. And so I started doing research, and we embedded ourselves with a group of janitors for a year and a half, cleaned with them, and tried to understand how they made meaning in their work. And what we found, and what we've found since, is that it wasn't any big initiatives, big perks, big programs, big platforms. It was very small moments in which they felt seen by someone, heard by someone, thanked by someone. One guy in the group said, "Don't give me a free certificate or a free certificate or um, a free sandwich. Remember my name and say thank you." And these small moments of mattering, where we feel significant, was what created a sense of meaning in a very difficult job. And we found that since in our research. So mattering is the belief, the feeling that we're significant to the people around us. And it comes from two things: feeling valued by the people around us and feeling that we add value to the people around us.
Hmm. I mean, you hit that kind of. I feel like a lot of folks have heard this, like, okay, remember people's name. That means a lot to them, and that's sort of that first kind of peek into this, like, oh, this first part of just like, okay, you remember my name. That means you remember who I am. That means that you've seen me in some capacity, and it's
Mm.
very even just that piece is very compelling. But you go even deeper beyond this. You're I think that the first piece and the part that I've dabbled in is this kind of like seeing other people, how to as a leader, how to teach leaders the art of making sure other people feel seen is kind of that
Mm.
first piece. And that's the what I understand based, from reading the book. I understand that that's kind of the step one or phase one of mattering. Is that right?
Yeah, as a human, right, to be seen is to be real. It's to know that you are present, that someone remembers you, that someone thinks about you. And we go back to things like remembering someone's name. When you just hear, "Hey, leader, remember someone's name," you think, "Oh, well, that's really simple." But if you take it back and really think about what that does for somebody, I mean, No one would be here listening to this podcast if at some point you hadn't mattered enough to someone in your life to keep you alive. So the
Okay.
need to
Sure.
matter, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to go way back here because I think we have to couch some of this advice in something really important. The need to matter is a survival instinct. It is the first thing we do. We actually don't search for food when we're born. We searched for someone to care for us. And as we grow up and as we go to work, that survival instinct turns into the fundamental need to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed by the people around us.
Mm,
And
mm.
it never goes away. I mean, it's the foundation for everything from motivation to engagement. For example, it's almost impossible for anything to matter to a human who doesn't believe that they matter, right? One of the things that we've gotten wrong about things like employee engagement is that we've expected people to care about their work before we've made sure they feel cared for in their daily interactions.
Yeah. That
So
feel.
when,
Yeah. Go ahead.
and so
Yeah.
when you look at like the latest Gallup data, and it's so interesting. I mean, Gallup's just going to perpetually be sending us these reports that tell us that 7 out of 10 of us are emotionally uninvested in our work for the
I don't
next
need to open up the next Gallup email to know what
100
it's going to
years, right?
say. Yeah. Yeah.
But this latest one was really interesting. It's the lowest it's been in 10 years.
Hmm.
And when you look at two data points, it's very revealing. One, just 39% of the sample of 15,000 people indicated that someone at work cared about them as a person. Think about that. Just 30% said that someone could name their unique potential or their unique gifts, right? That
Yeah.
mirrors research that shows that 30% of people feel invisible. So let's go back to your comment about seeing. One of the things that's happening is I don't think this is a disengagement crisis. It's really a mattering deficit and feeling unseen, feeling invisible, feeling dispensable is one of these hidden drivers that the survival instinct is not being met. And you can see this when people feel unseen, two things happen. They either withdraw. That's what quiet quitting was. It was really the inevitable withdrawal response to someone who feels insignificant, or they act out in desperation. They leave, they protest, complain, blame, all the quote unquote toxic behaviors. So anyway, feeling seen is the first part, the most elementary form of mattering, and it starts with being a noticer, learning to notice people.
There was some data that came out a bunch of years ago that was talking about kind of the most important driver of, or one of the most important drivers of engagement was for someone, an employee, to be able to see the result of their work, the effect of their work.
Mm.
And I feel like that is a facet or kind of just a skin on the mattering piece, right? It's one way in. And they don't talk about obviously that wasn't that whatever the research wasn't focused on or understanding the deeper piece of it, but it does it struck me, or I flashed on that stat when I was reading through the book and thinking about it, because it speaks to what became this driver. I see this, and it wasn't even your manager, your leader, your peer told you. It was just somehow you figured out that you did something that made a difference, whatever that might have been. And
Mm.
so it's almost like that connection between what you were saying. It's like, I care about you and your work makes a difference.
Yeah, so it's that feeling valued, feeling seen, heard,
Yeah.
and then knowing how you add value.
How you add
You know,
value. Oh,
we've
right, right, right.
and that is so that first piece, and we can get into some of the skills or practices for each of these in a moment, but that
Yeah.
first piece of noticing others, right? Of actually like remembering the details of their lives and seeing them as unique people. I mean, you can know your team, but not notice that someone's struggling. You can know your best friend and not notice that they're suffering. You know, notice is the deliberate act of paying attention to the details, ebbs, and flows of someone's life, and then offering an action to show them that they're thought about. It takes a lot of intention, a lot of attention, and tools and practices. But the second piece of that is when. So here's what happens when people feel valued, they develop two beliefs: self-worth, which is called self-efficacy, like I'm worthy, and then self-esteem, and then self-efficacy, which is I'm capable, which drive everything else. So The relationship between feeling valued and adding value is that the more people feel valued, the more confidence they have to add value. The more they add value and the more a leader reveals how they add value, the more they feel valued. And you get this virtuous cycle that results in motivation, performance, well-being. And so
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, those two sides. Our historic view on employees since the Industrial Revolution has been that people should be valued once they add value,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the opposite is true in human psychology. People must feel valued to add value.
Okay, I'm going to just repeat that because to me that feels like one of the major takeaways from this conversation. The the basic presumption that we have all moved forward with in life, just sort of our universal unconscious, is only once you do something valuable should you be then praised or seen or awarded, right? Congratulations, you get this trophy or whatever it might be. But the fact is that if you wait for that, it's not it is less likely to happen than actually valuing seeing and valuing that person, and then they're more likely to create that value. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. Because one of the things that great leaders do who show people they matter is they give them the indisputable evidence of their significance. What I mean by that is that you said show them how they add value. So one of the janitors that I worked with, she was near homelessness before she got a position. And she said she had to take the job just to put food on her table. She said she wished she could have done anything more with her life than be just a janitor. She said she clocked in, she clocked out. That's all she did. And she kept thinking to herself, oh, what's wrong with you? And one supervisor noticed her struggling and brought her into a room and showed her a dictionary and opened it to the definition of the word custodian, which is a person responsible for a building and everyone in it. And she's recounting this to me in this interview. And she goes, when he said to me, you are responsible for this building and everyone in it, something clicked. It was the first time in my life that anybody showed me I was worthy and that I was useful. That moment led her to think about her job in a different way. Later on, she said to me that every time I go into the bathroom in the university dormitories to clean it, I say to myself, I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick.
Mm,
Right? She saw how she mattered. He showed her. It was indisputable. Here's the definition of custodian. He noticed that she was struggling. He affirmed her. He reminded her how she was needed, which is the final piece of mattering. And so she felt like she mattered. So she started acting like she mattered. Right? She showed up. She committed. She's been there for 18 years. She's one of the most sought after cleaners. So even when we look at childhood attachment, like when children, and I know this is interesting to bring this into like a work HR conversation, but when children feel important to their parents, they are more likely to go out, experiment, take risks, and learn because they can come back and they know that there's a safe base for them.
mm,
Psychological safety, everybody's heard that word.
yep.
Everybody's read books about it now, probably all your listeners. They didn't want to call it this, but psychological safety is just adult attachment. Because when we feel that someone has our back, when we have a secure base, which is that leader, that culture, that relationship with the person right across from us, we can go out, experiment, take risks, and learn why because we know we already matter.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not going to lose that
We're
status.
not going to screw it up, right?
We're
Like,
not going to
yeah.
lose that status. Now that status, that imagine the panic of a newborn that reaches out for significance and finds no one, right? It's that same stress of insignificance that we feel when that relationship, that safe, secure relationship in which we feel like we matter is threatened. And I would argue that many leaders that are leading in organizations right now, we've lost the skill set to make sure people feel noticed, affirmed, and needed, seen, heard, valued, and needed, which is driving a lot of the fear, the anxiety, the withdrawal, the
Yeah.
disengagement, loneliness
Yeah.
that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew. All right. I mean, it's really intense. I mean, what I find so compelling about this is how primal and prime this is, right? We're talking about attachment theory, one of the fundamental concepts in how people develop from being, children, and connecting it to psychological safety. And this idea, that little piece, I think is so much more compelling as a definition than I have heard ever as far as psychological safety because it makes sense. You feel secure in your relationship, and there it to me matches, it mirrors this drop in engagement, right? Or rise in disengagement because people are so, and you're starting, you'll, like you said, we saw it in quiet quitting, but we're seeing it in disengagement. Well, no, I can't quit. I can't do the first thing of like protest. I'm going to go somewhere else, or I'm going to not go somewhere else and just like stay here and be annoyed by it and just not engage. And it's such a revelatory concept to be able to go, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. It's not they go first and then you reward them. It's you reveal. I would almost say reveal, I think, when you were telling that story, right? It's not like I'm going to demonstrate that you have been effective. It's I'm going to reveal that you have always had this capacity and there's like this power to it.
Exactly. I had a leader who was a facilities manager for the National Park Service. He had a practice every Friday. He would send his group photos that he took that week of visitors using like a repaired bridge or a walkway. And he all he would did, it was like the shortest email. He would just said, "Look what you did this week." That was it. He had the best morale, the lowest turnover in the Park Service.
I mean, there's that like connecting directly to the effect of the of what you're doing, right? Like you have,
Look what you did this week. But I
yeah.
mean, I think when, for example, for like people who are leading organizations and in companies, is that's a skill. Like that's a skill. That's a practice. He had a process. I mean, he went and took the time to take those pictures, send them to them. People who, and when you couch this stuff in this basic human need for attachment, like when someone says, remember people's name, it lands much differently because it's not just remembering someone's name, it's
Yeah,
meeting like the
yeah,
fundamental need for significance they
yeah.
have. And the way you do it becomes different. I think one of the, some people with my work, they say to me, like, Zach, like, this is common sense. I mean, why do you have a job? Um,
Fantastic. Thanks.
and I always say, yeah, so if it's common sense, why do 30% of people say they feel invisible in the place where they spend a third of their lives?
Yeah,
Why are 65% of people perpetually feeling underappreciated, undervalued? It's
yeah,
obvious that what's
yeah.
common sense is not common practice.
That's right. Those
Um,
two things are very different.
very different. And so the good news though is that you can relearn, scale, craft these skills to ensure people feel seen, valued, and essential in everyday interactions. And that's also why you made a really good point earlier. That's also why the employee engagement industry is now a $1 billion industry. There's thousands of books on engagement. There are over 100 proprietary surveys to measure engagement.
Yep.
Yet we're still more disengaged than ever,
What happened? Yeah, right. Why
right?
isn't it working?
And that's really because again, look at that data. Programs, perks cannot solve our disengagement crisis. Engagement is the result of how we feel in interactions. So that means only people and only people recrafting their daily interactions can solve the fact that 39% of people don't feel that someone cares about them as a person at work, which is driving disengagement. So,
Yeah.
like compensation, money can't value somebody. It's an inanimate object. It's a symbol of value. A perk can't value somebody. People value people. And it's hard for people to understand that because the other stuff is so much easier. Let's just unload a new program, a new initiative, a new set of perks, new work from home flexibility. But it's all not going to matter unless that person feels that they matter to the people they see every day.
Is this is this the fun of I'm convinced that for God, maybe it's 2 decades now, management has really become a lost art. And because of the kind of the speed and the experimenting with the flattening of organizations, and it's like, oh, these are just the middle managers, right? So it's like a kind of a language thing, but also a disinvestment, and it's they're just the hubs of information, right? They're just the USB hubs that we used to have where you plug
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
in.
yeah.
That's all that
Uh-huh.
is. And to me, I've been kind of searching for, and I don't want to proclaim a panacea here, but it does feel like this is the essential job of the manager. Not
Yeah.
to like do this, coordinate the troops, which, I guess is part of it. It's like but that example of that leader from the national parks. Hey,
Yeah.
amazing job, right? This is what we need to learn. If you are a manager, if you're a leader in any sort, like this is the critical skill that we need. And folks who have listened to any of my other episodes know that I go on and on and on about how in distributed world, there's very little, we don't give the time or the space to create these relationships and connections. And that becomes this is part of that, right? Like part of my whole thing is like we need to be reconnecting because you don't have that, you're not going to lunch together anymore. And so you're missing that. And so to me, that's again like this relationship, this connection, having a relationship, a real human relationship with someone you can trust, who they are as a human, who they are beyond just their face on Zoom and the project they're working on. That is to me one of the big gaps. And so to me, mattering is just kind of reaffirming this like strengthening of those ideas. This is what needs to be coming across those connections is amazing. I see you and you're amazing. You're valuable.
And and not only that, I mean, we learn how to be a human when we're in these real human relationships.
Amen.
One of the things that's happened is that since 2000, we've been able to just get away from the situations that hone the very skills to be human.
Yeah.
So if you give me some bad news, I can just send you a little sad face emoji and say, I'm sorry to hear that. I don't have to sit with you anymore and seek understanding and show compassion. If you give me some good news, I can just flash you a thumbs up emoji. Oh, great job. I don't have to sit with you and actually use the skill to say, hey, Josh, like I'm so proud of the
Yeah.
journey that you've been on. I
Yeah.
see these gifts within you, and I've noticed those for the past 5 years. That's a skill, right? And so the average adult now sends 30 to 40 text-based messages on some platform in work a day. We're more connected than ever. We have more platforms for connection, more kudos platforms for peer recognition. Where Americans are spending now 3 times more of their time in meetings than in 2020. The solution to loneliness has been to connect more, but we're still lonely. And why is that? Well, it's not the quantity of connection that matters, it's the quality of the connection. And the cure for loneliness is not having more people around you. It's feeling that you matter to the people around you. And the skills to create that sense of significance, we've lost those because the less we use a skill,
Yeah.
the less proficient we get at it.
Yeah.
And then here we are with people saying, Zach, isn't this common sense? Well, no, it's not. It's not common sense because since the 1970s, a military psychologist named these things soft. And whenever our brain sees something as soft, we see it as simple and we're susceptible to an overconfidence bias and we think we're better at it than we are. That's partly the reason why less than 2% of the world right now gets formal education on things like how to listen well. So, the impetus for the modern organization, the modern leader, is in my view, in my opinion, is to relearn and scale these essential human skills to see, hear, value another human being. And I think with AI is eclipsing our operational skills. So all we're going to have left is the most in-demand skill is
That's
going to
right.
be the skill to ensure the next person you interact with feels seen, heard, valued, and needed.
That's right. Exactly. Right. We no longer need to have any of that organized. Like it's all going to be about the humans and the emotions. Um, yeah, I have so many thoughts. Okay, so let's move into, so maybe quickly you can give us the three kind of, I don't remember how you call them, the three states or the three phases of mattering, and then we can get into what are some practices. We can learn some practices.
Yeah, look, and there's nothing like absolutely revolutionary about this idea. You know, this is sort of ancient. What I've done is I sought over the last 5 years to categorize these essential human skills because I found that it was very hard for people to name them.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
if you can't name something, you can't do anything
Communicate
about
it.
it.
Yeah.
So you, as you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so this is not the end all be all model, but it's a start, right? And the three areas, and this came out of asking people, thousands of people, when you feel that you matter to someone, what are they doing? This is a great time to just pause the podcast and ask yourself, when you feel that you matter, what's happening? You know, who's around you? What are the people doing? What skills are those people using to help you feel that way?
Mm,
And you'll likely find one of three things, right? Moments of mattering happen when we feel noticed. So we've talked about that, seen and heard. Moments of mattering happen when we feel affirmed, when we can see how our uniqueness makes a unique difference. It's very important to recognize that there's a big difference between appreciation, recognition, and affirmation.
mm,
Appreciation is showing general gratitude for somebody. An appreciation program can do that. Employee Appreciation Day can do that. Recognition is showing gratitude for what someone does. It's elevating what they do, their inputs. But affirmation is showing them the specific evidence of their unique significance. You can only do that in an interpersonal relationship.
mm,
So, affirmation has two sides, revealing someone's uniqueness and then showing them how that uniqueness makes a unique difference and how they and their work make a unique difference. So, it's things like knowing, naming, and nurturing people's unique gifts, their purpose, their perspective, their wisdom, uh, their strengths, and then showing them how that makes a difference, just like that guy did who took the picture, right? Collecting and telling stories of significance, showing people that downstream impact. So noticing, seeing, and hearing, affirming, showing people the unique difference they make, and then showing people how they're needed. This one's tough for people, especially in our Western, more individualistic society, but making sure that people feel relied on and indispensable because the science is pretty clear. When people feel replaceable, they'll act replaceable.
mm.
But when people feel that they're relied on, they show up and they commit. So noticed, affirmed, and needed. Some of my Australian friends remember it because it's Nan, which means grandma in Australia. So people remember it like, oh, it's grandmotherly if you had a nice grandma. I had an Italian grandma, so it didn't quite fit with me. But Nan, do I make sure, and it gives us an evaluative question, do I make sure people feel noticed, affirmed, and needed every day? And as an organization, you can say, look at my employee groups. Who do we need to notice more?
Yep.
Who do we need to affirm more? Who do we need to
Yep.
show how they're needed more? And it takes this idea from common sense to common practice. And there are many skills within each of those practice areas.
Yeah. One of the elements, and again, I'm dabbling in some of this and learning a ton from this conversation and from the book, and I really appreciate it. I've been working with some groups and teaching them, as you pointed out, how to listen better to their peers
Mm.
and their employees. And I wrap up the session by saying, here, I want you to do one thing. Think of the one employee on your team that you would like to get to know better, that you just don't know as well, and then reach out to them and ask them for 15 minutes of their time and have them tell you a story. Ask them use some of these skills, to listen. And to me, when you talk about, it's like get to know someone better, we just we just feel overloaded and we're like text messages, hey thanks, oh fuck, I forgot, da, 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 da. It's like, and so it's like, hey, take 15 minutes and connect with somebody and ask them about their day, ask them how they're doing. And all the better if you can do it in person. I think, there's definitely a hierarchy of value, even if you just see someone in person and you know put your hand on their shoulder and say, hey, thanks, I appreciate what you said. Or it's so much more compelling than just that Slack message.
I love that. And that's the noticing piece, right? Of helping people feel seen and helping people feel heard. But you'd put if you had to pay an invoice, you'd put that on your to-do list. So why aren't we putting check in on so and so because their parent is in the hospital on our to-do list?
Yeah.
We You know, we tend to leave these things up to chance. So one of the things I talk about is to schedule your good intentions. And I
I
always think
love
about
that.
myself when I'm out walking my dog. I think about all the people I should thank. I'm the nicest person in the world when I'm out, like walking my dog or hiking or whatever. I think I should text somebody. I should send these emails. Wow, I'm so thankful. I'm so grateful. And then boom, I get back to my office. I have this big to-do list, and I
Yep.
just,
Yep. My
it's
my desk
amazing
is
how,
covered with
right?
like, I
Yeah,
gotta
it's
do
like,
these things, but it's
it's amazing
not.
how often we put off like an act of kindness that builds our legacy for answering another email.
Yeah.
So my
Yeah.
my advice is to like when like most no leader wakes up and it's like, hey, I'd like to be an uncaring leader today. It's that we behave in ways that are perceived as uncaring.
Right.
So changing your behaviors is important. So putting that intention you have, like, oh, I should check in with that person. Boom, just open your phone up, put it on your calendar, put it on your to-do list, so at least you'll see it. And again, that's what helps us make this common practice. And then when you do check in with somebody, go beyond the greeting, right? We say things like, "How are you?" or "How are you doing?" Or if I listen to another meeting where the leader starts the meeting with, "How's everybody doing? Good?" I'm gonna lose my mind because can you imagine if you were in that room and you weren't good?
Yeah.
Would you raise your hand and be like,
No, actually,
not,
I'm terrible. Thanks for asking.
not me? No,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like instead of that, what is your attention today? What have you been thinking most about today? What's been most meaningful to you today? What's something you're struggling with today? How can I help? The go beyond the greeting. And that's just a simple way. Just ask better questions that give you the data so you can actually see people. The other one is someone gets in for this all company meeting. Obviously there's like economic turmoil, and the leader says, I hope everybody's doing well today. Like, right? If I'm not doing well, the last thing I need is your hope.
Yeah. Right.
I need your support. So you have to build that relational groundwork. Those greetings are fine, but we have to recognize they're greetings, not question. Go beyond. And that'll make those moments that you talked about, which I think are great. Like schedule that 15 minutes, make that time and space, and then make sure you're practicing going beyond and getting data so you can actually understand a person.
Hmm. What kind of information about a person should I be looking for? Is there something? Is there something that's gonna make a bigger difference if I happen to know or there's always kind of that trope of like, oh, how are your kids? Or like, or how's
Yeah.
your wife? How's your husband? How's your partner? Like, is that what we're looking for? Is that kind of like, oh, the things that you care about? What should I start to poke around for and inquire about that's going to make a difference?
It's really individual. One of my favorite questions to ask is when you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? Like that's a question that can like save a relationship. I mean, any relationship. When you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? And then
Mm,
do more of that.
mm,
Right? That is the most compelling data I think a leader can get. And someone may say, "Oh, well, you ask about how things are going in my life. You remember like things about my life. You name you know my kids' names. When
mhm.
someone's out sick, you show up differently. You know that if you know I'm tired, right? Someone else may say, "Oh, you're always giving me what I need in my work, right?" So if that's the case, then with that person, what you want to be doing is really checking in and remembering the details of what's going on with how they feel about their work. If they're nervous about a meeting and they tell you, next time you see them, write it down somewhere and say to them, "Hey, I remember last time we talked, you were nervous about that meeting. How was that going?" Or, "Do you want to talk through that a little bit more?" This doesn't have to be the deep, dark secrets of everybody. You don't have to be quote unquote everybody's best friend. It's meeting that basic need to be noticed. So my one of my practices is on the top of my one-on-ones. I write, "Don't forget to ask about dot dot dot." That's just a practice for me because I'm not a huge journaler. It's a practice for me that I just remember, gosh, Emerald who works for me, she's amazing. Gosh, I know that her daughter was in her first pageant last Friday. I remembered she was like super into that, talking about that. I should ask how that's going.
Yeah.
it's just those so it's individualized. But I would also say that when you're talking about what should you hear, what should you listen to for
Yeah.
another person, it's the meaning behind their words. It's what they're actually, you're trying to get what they're actually thinking and experiencing, but not saying. And that happens only when you're a noticer. So I could ask you, I could say, "Hey, Josh, how was your weekend?" And if you say, "Oh, it was good," and that's fine, and we go on with the conversation. If I said, "How was your weekend?" You say, "Oh, it was good, I guess." That's an entirely different meaning. So if I'm a noticer, I'm picking up on that little shift of frustration. I say, "Oh, sounds like you're kind of frustrated about that. What was going on that made you feel that way?" Boom, right there, you're getting at the meaning behind the words
And
versus just
they
going on with the conversation.
and that person feels seen.
Yeah,
Even if they're saying I'd rather not share, right? Like they're not
yeah,
everybody's going to want to,
right.
but you're like, I see you, right? Like that at the very least, it's like I understand that you're coming across this way and something's going on. Just let me know if there's anything I can do to help.
Yeah, I was coaching a team and one of them had gone around. They've gone around and done these check-ins and they're like, "Oh yeah, I had that meeting we have every year, every quarter at this time." And they were like, it was, I'm so glad that's over, right? And the team's like we're like, "Yeah, so glad," right? We're so glad that that's over with. Thanks for doing that. Nobody checked it. Nobody stopped and said, "Oh, yeah, I can see that you're really like frustrated about that. I mean, what could we do differently about that?" Like it's so disturbing how often we normalize despair. Oh, that it's just the time in the quarter. That's just how our
You just
industry is.
have to do
Everybody's
it. We just have to
overloaded.
do the
Hey,
360s.
everybody's tired right now. If you just push through to the end of this quarter,
Right.
right?
Then you're going to have another quarter where you're also exhausted, right? Like it's
Right.
not.
So like I think that's really important the work you're doing on listening because instead of just normalizing despair, you have to seek understanding. And once you start seeking understanding, you then are tasked with the responsibility to do something about it. Right? And that's what compassion is. Compassion is providing an action or a resource that alleviates someone's unnecessary struggle.
Mm.
And you know, in contrast to that meeting, I had a leader who we were doing some coaching with, and he had a group, and they went around. He asked them how they were doing, and one person said, "I'm really overloaded right now on this Zoom call." And he immediately said, "Hey, that meeting we have on Friday, why don't you take that off? Get caught up." It was like this really amazing moment. It was so small, but everybody on the call
Mm.
relaxed.
Mm.
Like that's a small moment of compassion that, if you notice it, you take action right away, can go a long way to help people feel seen.
Zach Mercurio, thank you so much for coming on The Power of Mattering out May 13th. I highly recommend it. And you're giving away if you pre-order, you get some extra special resources. What do folks get if they pre-order?
Yeah, I went kind of nuts on this thing. I made this companion workbook because I all the templates, like how to ask better questions that we talked about, how to
Yep.
do it, how to craft your own meaningful check-in, how to actually affirm somebody, tell a story that shows them the significance that they made, how to use symbols like that janitor supervisor did, how to show people that they're needed, language to use. It's all there. So yeah, if you pre-order now, you can get that. We have like a book club discussion guide. You can get the first couple chapters, and just start digging into it. I mean, honestly, you can start just using the workbook right away before you get the book. So
Yeah.
you can do that. Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. So head over to zachmercurio.com, ZachMercurio.com. Zach, this has been amazing. I feel like we've just even touched the surface, but there's so much that I've already learned about the power of mattering. Thank you so much for coming on Great Mondays Radio. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Josh.